The year is 1426. A young girl who had been living in the court of Italian royalty, becoming friends with the Marquis's daughter, is at an important turning point in her life. Does she carry on with the family, or does she devote her life to her faith? Fast forward a few years, she's become one of the most admired nuns in her order, and her faith seems never ending. She writes poetry, books, draws illustrations, plays music, all while leading her abbey. She's kind and patient, and she just wants to help everyone around her. Who was this remarkable woman? Howdy y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we explore the stories of various saints throughout history and learn about what they did and how we came to recognize them as saints today. Today, we're going to explore the life of Saint Catherine of Bologna, one of the best examples of what it means to be in the Poor Clares order. Saint Catherine of Bologna was born September 8th, 1413, in Bologna, Italy. Her full name is Catherine de' Vigri, but we'll just stick with Catherine for now. Her family was very well off. Her father, Giovanni Vigri, was a diplomat to the Marquis of Ferrara, Niccolò il d'Este, and as a result, the family could afford a lot of the luxuries of the time. Her mother, Benefuente Mamolini, was a personal assistant to Niccolo's wife, Teresina Malatesta. Because of this connection, Catherine received a very thorough education in reading and writing, as well as in singing and miniature artwork, which she utilized in her later writings that we'll talk about in a bit. And she did all this alongside the daughter of the Marquis, and the two were pretty darn close because of it. Catherine was particularly gifted in her artwork and also playing the viola, which I think is pretty fun because I used to play the viola myself and it's a fairly forgotten about instrument. She also excelled in Latin, and all of this together would prove to be a very valuable resource for her, and she utilized it a lot in her later life. There are a few suggestions that suggest what exactly triggered Catherine to leave the Marquis family. One suggestion is that she just simply wanted to leave and pursue her faith. Another suggests that the Marquis's wife was executed and then Catherine left them. And the last reason that I found was that the daughter of the Marquis got married and she wanted Catherine to come with her, live with them, be her personal assistant. But Catherine politely declined because she felt a calling to lead a life devoted to God, and she opted to pursue that calling. What makes her decision to pursue a life devoted to God even more remarkable is that she was just 13 years old at the time, which is pretty young to make such a life-changing decision. Now, she had always been known to be a very faithful child and extremely devoted to everything connected to heaven, so it's not super crazy for her to make this life change, but still, at 13 years old, that is kind of crazy. In 1426, she joined the convent of Corpus Domini at Ferrara. At the same time, the convent was experiencing an internal struggle or a debate amongst themselves on if they would continue following the Augustinian rule that they had been using, or if they would start to adopt the newer Franciscan rule. Catherine herself preferred the Franciscan rule of living. 5 years after joining the convent, Catherine and a few other women decided to establish a monastery of the Order of Poor Clares, which was founded by St. Francis and St. Clare of Assisi, whom I have an episode on about if you want to learn more about her. Catherine was happy to serve in the less sought-after roles, which kind of makes sense because that's what the Poor Clares were all about. They were about doing the small, menial things and being happy doing them. Some of the duties that she gladly carried out were doing the laundry, working in the kitchen as a baker, and caring for the animals. And once while she was baking bread, she was summoned to sing in a special service that would take over 5 hours to complete. So she made a sign of the cross over the bread loaves that she was baking, and she said, "I commend you to our Lord." And with that, she left. When she returned, it wasn't burnt loaves or rocks, really, in the oven, but perfectly baked bread loaves instead. Over time, her duties at the convent expanded, and she was actually given oversight of more and more offices and jobs at the convent. After just a little while, Pope Nicholas V himself appointed Catherine as superioress of the convent, and she took care of everyone under her wing. The convent and community around it became very well known for their austere living and exceptional devotion to their faith. Then, in 1456, Catherine was asked to return to Bologna and establish a second monastery, and there she would be abbess. Throughout this time, she continued painting. Just because she was living an austere lifestyle doesn't mean that she couldn't enjoy some of her hobbies. It just means that she would focus on praying, and then, in times when she wasn't praying, she could pursue her hobby if she wasn't doing other work. And one of her paintings is actually hung up on display in the Venice Gallery, and it's a painting of Saint Ursula. She also wrote spiritual guides. One of the most famous was the treatise on the 7 spiritual weapons necessary for spiritual warfare. Now, I won't go into detail on what's covered in that treatise because it's a deep topic to dive into, and I would rather devote an entire episode to talking about that treatise or that book. So if you want me to, let me know, and I will gladly put something together and we can take a look at it. But for now, we'll just carry on with Catherine's life. Throughout her adult life, she was also known to have visions, not only of Jesus and of the Virgin Mary, but also of Satan, as well as a vision of the fall of Constantinople in the coming years. So she really got a chance to truly understand the details of spiritual warfare, and these battles are recorded in her treatise, and she fought her own battles constantly. There was a time in her early adult life where she didn't necessarily come close to walking away from her faith, but she could recognize that she wasn't as devoted as she used to be and as she wanted to be. She asked for help from God, and after a little while, she finally saw a sign, and she realized that she'd been undergoing spiritual warfare this whole time, and that's kind of what really drove her to write this treatise. Catherine only got to serve as the abbess of the monastery in Bologna for a handful of years because during Lent in 1463, she actually became dangerously sick. Now, it is said that she had been chronically ill since her young 20s, but she never let any of that hinder her devotion. However, during 1463, things took a drastic turn, and then on March 9th, it became too much, and she passed away at just 49 years old. But the end of her spectacular life wasn't the end of her gifts to the world. She was buried without a coffin, which was customary in her order, and only 18 days after she was buried, her body was exhumed because there were just so many people who were visiting her grave who were just experiencing miraculous healings, and there was a sweet odor coming from her gravesite. So, when they dug up her body, they realized that she was not decayed at all. She had no signs of just being buried in the dirt for nearly 3 weeks. And as an incorruptible, her body was kept and actually still displayed to this day. It's in the Chapel of Poor Clares in Bologna, dressed in her habit. And for being dead for half a millennia, her body is in remarkably good condition. Her viola is also preserved, though arguably worse condition, mostly because being an inanimate instrument, I kind of would have expected it to hold up better than her body, but comparatively, it's kind of close actually. Now, her body has been affected by the constantly lit lamps, and the soot has kind of built up on her throughout history, but other than that, her body's really not that deteriorated. A sister in Catherine's order, Sister Illuminata Bembo, wrote a biography on Catherine in 1469. That was not long after her death, so her life was still pretty fresh in everyone's memories. This, combined with the writings that Catherine directly wrote herself, really help us understand this incredible woman's life. Catherine was beatified in 1524 by Pope Clement VII and was later canonized on May 22nd, 1712 by Pope Clement XI. Her feast day is March 9th. She's the patron saint of artists, liberal arts, for Bologna, Italy, and against temptations. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. Or if you want me to go into the details of the treatise on these 7 weapons against spiritual warfare, let me know, and I will gladly dive into that. So what do you think of Saint Catherine of Bologna? Have you read any of her literary works, like the treatise or any of her poetry or anything else? I hope you found her story interesting, and I look forward to learning your thoughts on Saint Catherine of Bologna. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, like, comment, share with your friends, or send me a suggestion on a saint to check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. I try to upload once a week, every Thursday. Take care, and have a wonderful day.